Kristi Burke hosts the website and the YouTube channel Jezebel Vibes. I would describe her as a perpetrator of good trouble. You know, she's a disruptor, but in the most positive sense of the word. She's part of the resistance. Christy joins me today. Would you call yourself a perpetrator of good trouble? Because I get those vibes off of you.
Hey, that's a compliment. I think you are one of many people to call me a disruptor recently, and that is not something I ever considered myself to be before probably this past year, but I wear it with a badge of honor.
Hey, I think when we talk about resistance, I'm reminded of all these hands-off 2025 protests and I participated in one, and I'm going to be doing so again. You know, this idea of an expression of freedom, of liberation. I mean, you ended up resisting years ago when you were challenging your former faith, which, as I understand it, was Southern Baptist religion,
Yes.
Southern Baptist Christianity. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, I was deep in the Southern Baptist religion. I came from a church that I was kind of all over the place, but I think that we most identified with Southern Baptist.
Well, come on. I mean, we're talking about, I went to a Southern Baptist church. I got both sides because mom was Pentecostal and dad was ex-Lutheran.
Oh,
So we ended up in a Baptist
oh
school
wow.
and it was like 31 flavors, right? But the Baptist church that I went to, no applause was allowed. I'm sure that's relaxed. Were you allowed to
Mhm.
clap in your church?
No, I was not allowed to clap. Actually, it's funny you bring that up because I've been recently attending a Unitarian Universalist church. And I go every now and then. I don't go regularly, but when people perform, before the service, you might have a singer or somebody play the piano, everybody claps afterwards. And I always get this like feeling of like, oh, we're not supposed to do that, because in the church, you don't clap for people. You never praise anyone but God. So it's
So
very
is that
different.
the thinking? I was trying to remember. I mean, part of me thought maybe they thought it was too, I don't know, the Baptists and the Pentecostals, right? They're the Assembly of Gods. We're always sniping at each other about
Oh,
who
yeah.
had the correct doctrine. So we're like, well, we don't want to get too verbally aggressive out there. We don't want to perform too much lest we look
Right.
like those who are practicing an aberrant version of the faith. I always wondered if maybe that was part of the reasoning, but I'm
I
just
mean,
guessing.
I think that's pretty much what they told me. My understanding of it, which I think, I probably asked about it when I was very, very young. But my understanding was that when you were clapping for someone, you were praising them and you were exalting them in the house of the Lord. And so you were never to do that when you were in church. You were always supposed to only praise God and only give him the glory. So if somebody was singing or performing, that wasn't them. That was God working through them. They get no credit, only God.
Well, I'm interested in the type of Southern Baptist church. I don't want to spend too much time here, but so back in the 80s and 90s, the SBC, which by the way still thinks it's the year 1100, uh, but it was like wooden pews, and we had sort of arches and the big cross and the baptismal, and I think there are factions of the Baptist church that have tried to, I don't know, drag everybody else into the 21st century. They've got the lighting and the performing arts vibe and the cozy seats and they don't look as Baptisty. So I'm wondering, which version did you have? Were you on the wooden pews or were you more progressive in the faith?
Oh no, there was no progressive religion in my church. We were very much old school. The church that I was raised in, I think they must have founded it in like the late 1800s or something crazy like that. So it was very old, very traditional. We weren't allowed to have any kind of instruments like drums or guitar or anything like that. It was all piano music, organ music in the choir. And one funny rule that I love my husband loves to talk about is there was no dancing allowed. And so even if you got married in the church, a lot of people would get married in the chapel, but then they would have their ceremony or their reception somewhere else because the church didn't allow dancing even between married couples. So that's the kind of church I was raised in. It was very, very strict. I would say that my home life was a little less strict. It's that Southern Baptist thing where you put on nice for church, and then at home you're a little more relaxed. But the church itself, my Sunday school teacher, all of my friends and my mentors were very much entrenched in that traditional way.
I remember they used to say in the Baptist church that dancing was a vertical expression of a horizontal desire. It was like standing sex, right?
That's
So we
funny.
don't want, you got to leave enough room in between you for the Holy Spirit, or
Yes,
else,
I have heard
carnal
that.
things are going to
Right.
happen. That was the vibe.
Yeah.
So being a woman in this space, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm thinking, you're one of the Duggars. I mean, was it that bad? Was it skirts only and you can't have a leadership role? Is all that true for you?
In the church setting. So at church, there were not women leaders unless they were leading other women. I was not allowed to wear, there were very strange rules because when I look back on it, to me, I think a lot of it was for show. It's how you appear to others. It's how you look. It's not about the actual ethics or being, morally pure or a good person. So, at church, I wasn't allowed to wear pants unless it was like a Wednesday night when it was more relaxed for youth group. I could wear pants then, but Sunday mornings, absolutely not. Outside of church, perfectly fine. I was allowed to wear pants. I was even allowed to listen to secular music, watch, secular movies, for most of my upbringing. And then in my teenage years, I actually kind of adopted the ideologies in a much more committed way than my parents did. So I actually became a lot more strict and fundamentalist kind of on my own with the influence of the church.
Yeah, we should say you were on fire for God. And of
Yes, very
course,
much so.
the vigor of youth, right? If you're in that
Mhm.
culture and I'm guessing you had a youth group where you would have separate services and you would have
Right.
youth camps and clubs. Did you guys have summer camp? Like we had Falls Creek, which in Oklahoma, I think at the tri-state area, Southern Baptist would cart their children off for 2 weeks to do a summer camp, which sounds amazing. You got canoeing and hiking and crafts and all this other stuff. But 3 times a day, there were church services, and they would
Yeah.
either evangelize you or cause you to recommit, or sometimes they would do training things, situationals. All right, this half of the room, you're all the lost, and this half, you're all the saved people, and one has to convert the other. And here's a stopwatch, go. Do you have any experience at all with any of that stuff, Christy?
Oh, definitely. I did go to a lot of church camps. We did a lot of like youth group trips where we'd go up to Tennessee. I lived in Florida, so we would go up to Tennessee or North Carolina and go to the mountains and do skiing and things like that. And then that would always include, daily devotionals and prayers and all of that stuff, but it was much smaller. But when I was 14, I went to a church camp, I think in North Carolina, and it was for a week or two. And that was actually where I, rededicated myself. I had always, grown up in the church. There was no other way. There was no option. It's all I knew. So I never even questioned it. But because at home we were a little bit more relaxed, I was kind of wishy-washy with it. I always believed in Jesus, of course, but I just kind of I felt like I was a normal kid being raised in a very non-normal environment on Sundays and Wednesdays, basically. But at 14, when I went to church camp, they did the mornings. You had to do your devotionals. Everybody had to break up into quiet time and do their prayer and all of that for an hour. And then we would meet back up later in the evening for a service. And it was at one of those services that they raise the music up and they have the lights going. And it's very much emotional manipulation intended to get you to feel something and to compel you to do something. And, they said, if anybody feels like they haven't been saved, then now is the time to be saved. And I had always questioned my salvation because I was a very anxious kid. And I was taught in the Southern Baptist Church that you have to be sure that you are saved. And that if you are not walking with the Lord and you're not making the right choices, you could just not be saved. You could be not walking in the Holy Spirit. So as a kid, I would go to bed almost every night and I would pray to be saved because I didn't want to wake up in hell. And then fast forward to the youth camp, and I'm there and I'm like, I don't know, I might be saved. I know I've said the prayer a million times, but what if I didn't actually mean it? So in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I just kind of internally poured my heart out to Jesus and asked him to save me, and decided to dedicate myself to him. And I became very much involved in the church, and kind of grew into this like golden child of the church role for a few years.
But you're also in prison. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's watching, you're being surveilled. God knows your every thought. It's what Christopher Hitchens called thought crime.
Yep.
So, and then as I understand it, it was when you were a late teen that you liberated yourself. I have to tell your whole story, but I'm fascinated. So tell me some of it. What the hell happened to you?
Well, it was a few years. So I was 14 when that happened, and I was very serious. I'm the type of person that if I really believe in something and I'm passionate about it, that's all I do. And I also have ADHD and I hyperfocus. So I'm sure that probably had a lot to do with it too, where my brain gets fixed on something and then that just becomes everything to me. It's all I think about and all I want to do. And so for me, I think that there was a combination there of ADHD hyperfixation, where I was excited about this new thing that I could focus on. I could read my Bible and learn more about Jesus and my place as a Christian. But at the same time, I think also I was expected of me, and I wanted to be good, and I wanted to prove myself as a good girl and doing the right thing. And I just felt like that was the only way you could be good. You could, do the right thing in life, is to be on fire for Jesus. So I did what I thought that I was supposed to do. And then I just hyperfixated on it, basically. And I threw away all of my secular music, and I stopped, watching TV that I felt didn't glorify God. And I started going on mission trips and just getting really, really involved in that. And I think, yeah, just with that, naturally, you want to grow and learn more. And that's what I did. And through that process of trying to learn and understand the religion and God and my place in all of this, I had more questions than answers. And that just led me on this journey of constantly chasing answers to questions that I couldn't rationalize, and never being able to actually rationalize them. And if something doesn't make sense to me, I can't follow it or agree with it. I have to understand it. And I think trying to understand God and understand the Bible is really what put me in a place of walking away completely, or being able to, because I could never actually get to a place where it made sense.
I'm trying to picture you, and I don't know if you did this, going to the spiritual authorities in the Baptist church and saying, this doesn't wash. I don't buy this.
I didn't do that.
Why? How does this make sense? And they look at you as, okay, well, you're a woman, so you need to submit to male authority. Did that happen? Or was it just, it's a phase, or you just want to sin or something like that? What happened?
Well, what's funny is it was none of that, because I didn't really share my concerns and my doubts with my church or my parents. And so I think that probably contributed to the fact that me leaving home and walking away was very much a big event. A lot of people were very angry and upset with me, because I think they felt caught off guard, because from what they saw, one minute I was the golden child, I was the good Christian girl and on fire for Jesus. And then to them, the next minute I didn't believe it. And that's not what happened. It was a several year process. And I've told this story before, but basically what happened was I started kind of courting a guy from another church. He was a Calvinist, very hardline Calvinist. He believed that everything was predestined. Some people went to hell because God made them to go to hell, and I did not believe that. And so I started trying to dig into the whole theology of determinism and free will, which is a very confusing, complex topic, I think, even for people who have been studying this for years and years and years. It's a really tough philosophical topic. And I was only 16 when I was trying to figure that out. And so I kind of went on my own little journey, just trying to figure out what I believed. I would buy books with my babysitting money, and, I would watch videos and just trying to dig in to find the answers on my own. And when I would ask questions, it was never in a way that I was doubting. It was always just, I'm trying to understand this better. I'm trying to understand what we believe. And I felt like nobody ever really had solid answers for me because the church I went to wasn't big on like solid theology. It was more just, we love Jesus, we believe what the Bible says, and that's all there is to it. So they didn't have good answers for me.
That's unsatisfying for sure. How did
Yeah.
you tell them? Did you just blurt it out? I don't believe in God, or I'm not a Christian. I mean, what did you say, and how and when did you say it?
Well, I didn't actually tell anyone in my family that I didn't believe anymore until after I left home, and I had probably been gone for a year or two because I was 19 when I left home. I was 16 when I started kind of questioning things, but that questioning process was very long and drawn out. And through it, I think I was also trying to be a normal teenager, couldn't figure out what I believed. By the time I was 18, I felt so sheltered and so confused. And I just kind of broke out. I would kind of sneak out. I was living at home, but I would kind of sneak out and go party with friends. And so I was kind of like dipping into the outside world and really enjoying it. But also still feeling really guilty for not being a good Christian girl. So it was this kind of undercover, life that I was living for a little while until I really butt heads with my family. It was a big, huge thing. I left home very quickly, unfortunately. And when I was 19. Yeah. And then after that, I think I was about 21 before I realized that I was an atheist. But there was like a good couple years there where I still considered myself a Christian, but I didn't know what that meant. And I had no idea who God was, what he wanted from me. I didn't feel connected to God when I prayed. And then so over time, I think it just naturally got to a point where I was like, I don't have any good reason to hold on to this and I don't believe it. But I think it was that lingering fear of hell that kept me from admitting that to myself sooner.
But given the fact that you started this journey in your teens, a time when teenagers are known for rebelling against,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, their family and the family line and the customs and all that. I mean, did you get that? Oh, you're just young and it's a phase. And one day when you grow up, we know you're going to come back, right? We've trained up a child in the way that she should go and she will return to it. Did you get some of that?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I think, I had a parent that used to tell me that, they knew that this was just going to be a phase for me and that eventually I would fall flat on my face and I'd come running back to Jesus and, she would be there, my family would be there, and Jesus would be there with open arms waiting for me. And I think that they prayed for that for a very long time before they realized it was not going to happen. But I had family members that would tell me that they had prayed for me to fail, for me to get hurt, or for something bad to happen to me so that I would have to turn back to God and realize that I needed him. And then when my life started kind of going better and I was just kind of moving along and growing as a person and I didn't really need my family or support system as much anymore because I was becoming independent. I remember one day I told one of my parents that I was doing great. Nothing was going wrong. I didn't feel like God was punishing me. And they said that it was because Satan had gotten such a hold of me and tricked me into believing that I was doing so well that I didn't need God anymore. So no matter what happens, the narrative always flips.
I was told I was going through a phase when I was deconstructing. It won't be long. He'll be back. That was 18
Mm-hmm.
years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you and I have such similar backgrounds. When I said I think one of the things I actually said was like that. I'm good. I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm happy. I've got a life full of love and purpose, and there's no need to worry about me, and it's all good. And they're like, no, you're not. No, you're not happy. You just think you're happy, which is such a presumptuous thing to say. Like, no, I'm happy. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very dismissive way to approach someone else's autonomy and their humanity. and all of that. And then probably they're scared, right? Or your
Yeah.
mom and dad, right? They're hell believers, Baptist church. They probably think, holy shit, what now? Our daughter may be hellbound?
Yeah. I think it's tough because on one hand, I know that it is manipulation. And having come from the background that I came from, I had a really hard time with being um, very susceptible to emotional, psychological manipulation. And when they would say things like that, it really confused me. And even though I would be saying, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm happy, when they said those things back to me, there was still a little part of me that's like, oh, maybe what if I'm wrong? I could be wrong. And that was really hard to get over. It took me a very long time. And so I see that it's manipulation, but also I know that the brain is very strange and the brain will protect you from information that could cause you a lot of stress, a lot of trauma. And I think in a lot of ways, for my family who perhaps mistreated me throughout all of that, I think that their brains were just trying to protect them. They couldn't handle the idea that I would go to hell or that they could be wrong about what they believe. And so they refuse to even consider anything but that they are right and I am wrong, because they have to believe that in order to protect themselves. And they don't do it or they don't do it consciously, they do it subconsciously. And so I think that allows me to, I don't know, to just be a little more understanding and not so bitter and angry about it, because it was really hard to get through. And I don't talk to my family anymore for a lot of those reasons. But I also understand that they are victims just like I was, and they just never broke free. And that makes me feel really bad for them.
What refreshing nuance, right? Because a lot of people say it's all or nothing, either or. People can be perpetrators of bad ideas, perpetrators of harm, but also be victims of bad
Yes.
ideas and brainwashing and all those other things. And so we don't have to make them all of any one thing. Human
Right.
beings are extremely complex. And I appreciate the compassion that comes with that. I mean, you and I have both drawn a pretty hard line. Boundaries are important. And I think, families like to give themselves permission to do and say things that we would not allow from anybody else. And yet sometimes we think, oh, well, it's your mother, it's your father, you got to put up with it. Did you have to go through that? Did you have to sort of be like, hey, wait a minute, would I take this from somebody else?
Oh, definitely. I mean, years in therapy of my therapist saying, "Hey, you gotta set some boundaries. Maybe let's work on setting boundaries." And I'm like, "Absolutely not." I wouldn't even set any kind of boundary for a long time because I didn't feel like I was allowed to. When you're raised in that environment, even if you end up walking away from it, you no longer believe all of those core values, those core ideas about how you're supposed to behave, who you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to treat other people, and what you take from them. That is all still there. And the process of deconstruction, I've realized, is a very small bit of it is deconstructing what you believe about God. And a very big part of it is deconstructing your entire worldview and everything that you know about reality, existence, yourself, and other people. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely had to get to that point where I realized that I deserved to be treated a lot better and I wouldn't take this from anyone else. But it took me years and years and years to get to that point. And I've cut off several of my family members, and I haven't talked to them in years. And it's a really tough thing, but it was like the best thing I could have done. And it happened over a long period of time, just accumulating, where one day I just finally kind of just said, enough is enough, I'm done. And, it's unfortunate it happens, but for a lot of people who walk away, it's kind of the only option, especially if those you walked away from just cannot accept who you've become, and the fact that you're just not like them anymore.
Talking here with Kristi Burke of the Jezebel Vibes channel. Okay, there are some people going, who's Jezebel? I've heard of Jezebel. Sounds kind of, I don't know, naughty, right? Jezebel was probably doing some shady stuff in the Bible. Who was Jezebel and why Jezebel Vibes?
Well, originally Jezebel Vibes came just from a comment that I got on TikTok. Somebody just literally commented and said, "You've got Jezebel vibes." And I just thought that was so great. And I wanted to kind of reclaim it because Jezebel is often used as an insult against women who are strong, who think for themselves, who are confident, and refuse to bow down to patriarchal standards and traditional values. So I really liked the idea of reclaiming Jezebel. And I remember reading back through her story shortly after that and really kind of studying the words and the story and realizing that the things they said about Jezebel in church were so not biblical and were just kind of made up as a way to demonize her character. And Jezebel might not be, the most innocent character in the Bible or in history, but she's certainly not someone who was promoting child sacrifice like they often like to say. That's nowhere in the story, even though it's constantly attributed to her story. So when I was reading back through, I thought, this is someone who refused to bow down to this patriarchal God that these people wanted her to bow down to. And she decided to live her own life and do her own thing. And the people around her did not like that. And anytime men in the Bible had power, they could do whatever they wanted and it was perfectly fine. But when a woman has power and she decides to do things her own way, she is demonized as this horrible, sexually immoral woman who sacrifices children. And it's just not her story. And I loved that she knew her fate. She knew what was coming to her. And she decided to doll herself up and await her fate and stay true to herself to the very end. And even, getting thrown out of a window and fed to dogs, she stayed true to herself. And so I find that very admirable. And I really like kind of reclaiming that word, that name, Jezebel, as something that empowers me rather than is used as an insult against me.
It's kind of reminiscent of the traditional story of Lilith, the first wife of Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just, she was doing it her way. She wasn't going to be told what to do. She was sexually liberated. She demanded equality. And the men were like, Adam and God were both like, oh, this is not going to work out, right? You're out. Let's try and make a submissive helpmate, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I got Lilith vibes from what you were just saying. So
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because when I think about the story of Adam and Eve, Eve is such an interesting character. And I love reclaiming Eve too, because something I find to be really incredible about Eve is that she actually wasn't the sweet, submissive wife. She did her own thing. And in the garden, she's told by Adam. I love the story because God never actually tells Eve directly not to eat from the tree. It never says that he told her. It says that he gave the message to Adam. And then all of a sudden, one day, the serpent comes up to Eve and he says, oh, why aren't you eating from the tree? And she says, well, if we eat from it, we'll die. So what I take from the story is she was getting this information from Adam, not from God himself. And so Adam gave her an order, gave her a command. The serpent was like, hey, you're not going to die if you eat from it. Your eyes will be opened and you're going to become like God. And in the story, when she looks at the tree and it says that she sees the fruit is good for gaining wisdom. And so instead of thinking about what the serpent told her or what Adam told her, she looks at the tree and she says, you know what, this fruit looks good. I'm going to eat it. And she makes the decision to gain knowledge. I mean, that's what it's all about. She wanted to gain knowledge. And so she eats from the tree. And then exactly what the serpent said would happen happened, which is that her eyes were open and God says she has become like us or become like me, And so Eve ate from the tree because she wanted to, and then she gained wisdom and, she suffered the consequences, but she chose knowledge over ignorance. And she did that within herself. And I think that's a really cool story. And I love reclaiming Eve in that way too.
My friend Promise runs the Eve Was Framed channel. And I always like the way that's Eve was framed. She got a raw deal. Everybody's blaming the woman because right after that happened, what's one of the first things that happens is God's like, okay, well, from now on, you're going to be you're going to have desire for your husband. So sexual desire for your mate is going to be part of a curse, and it's going to hurt like hell to give birth to children, which is just crazy. And that was taught to the women in our culture. The reason that childbirth is so traumatic and so painful and agonizing and all those things is because all these thousands of years ago, Eve ate the fruit in the garden. And we just accepted it. Oh, well, that's interesting. It sucks for women, right? But even the women in my life accepted that that's the way it was. It's a weird kind of. Would you call it slavery, like a slavery of the mind?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's always been a way to keep women in their place. To say, you know what, this is your purpose. This is what God cursed you to be, and you better suck it up and you better like it because that's just the way things are. Your place is to listen and obey, and if you don't, well, look what happened to Eve, and now you have to suffer too because of Eve. And it is so strange how we just accepted that we deserve to be punished for what somebody that we didn't even know thousands of years ago did. But it was so easily accepted. And now that I'm so out of it, I look back and I'm like, man, what a terrible thing to tell people that, and to tell women that they deserve to be cursed, they deserve pain, and to be second class just because some woman a long time ago chose wisdom and knowledge for herself.
I like to frame it in a way that people they resist and yet they can't refute the facts of it. I think I frame it like a couple of cosmically conjured garden nudists engaged in a rebellious act of fruit munching because they were told to by a talking snake. I mean, if you say it in that way, then even the apologists are like, well,
Hey, come on.
come on, you make it sound so stupid. What are you
Right.
doing, Before I get into what you call an unlikely alliance, and you did a video about this a couple of months ago, I want to talk about some of the things that people are hurling at you to try to convince you to come back or to tell you that you're wrong. What are some of the apologetic arguments that you have to field? Is it that you want to sin or any of those types? I mean, do you hear some that are familiar enough to recite here?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it's all the hits, that you just want to send and all that. But I think at this point, I have developed a reputation with my content that shows that I'm very thoughtful and I have thought this stuff through. I'm not just some, I don't know, rebellious person who's trying to just have fun and screw over the Christians or screw over God. I don't think people really think of me like that anymore. I think it's pretty easy to see that I probably overthink. I think a lot. And so I think the number one comment that I get from people who disagree with me and perhaps want to try to convince me that I'm wrong is just that I'm not what is it that I'm just ignorant, or I'm not really thinking about this right, or I'm not really considering the context. You haven't really thought this through. So it's really just a way to tell me that I'm looking at it the wrong way, and I just need to, if I just shifted my perspective, I would understand. But because I am an atheist and I don't have the Holy Spirit, I can't shift my perspective because the Holy Spirit has to do that for me. It's kind of like this like circular thing where you have to how in order to get the Holy Spirit, you have to understand, but you can't understand unless you have the Holy Spirit. And it's just a way for them to be like, oh, well, no matter what, you're just wrong because you don't have the Holy Spirit to teach you.
As an ex-vangelical, do you use the label atheist? Do you get some people get hung up there? I don't really care too much what the labels are. I think I'm more interested in authenticity and people taking their journey on their terms. But do you embrace the word? Do you call yourself anything?
I do. I call myself an agnostic atheist, though I tend to shorthand it to atheist, just because that's what I am. I don't really need to say agnostic because that to me goes without saying. I just don't know. I struggle with using it because on one hand, I am an atheist and I'm proud to say that I am, and I'm not going to hide that. On the other hand, I know that atheist comes with a lot of misconceptions. People tend to misunderstand what I mean when I say I'm an atheist, and they assume that it means that I am sure there is no God, which couldn't be further from the case. It is just a lack of belief in a deity. So I struggle with using it because I know that people will always misunderstand or make assumptions. But I also kind of like that because it gives me the opportunity to clear the air and to clear up those misconceptions that people often have.
Let me toss this out and you can check me. I will say, well, I know the Christian God is a myth. Like we deconstructed that and we know the Bible is human made and we know it's contradictory and it's all the things that you and I talk about all the time. And so I know that I'm an atheist about that God. And I know I'm an atheist about the Islamic God. And I know I'm an atheist about here. But as far as the overall sort of deistic, is there a higher power or something out there somewhere? I guess agnostic makes more sense. Is that a fair way to approach it? I mean, would you say, we know the Christian God is just, we know that one's wrong, right?
Yeah. So I think these days I struggle so much to say I know the Christian God is not real. And it's really just it's just because of the way I like to present the things that I say. I think in the most basic, simple sense, yeah, I know that the Christian God does not exist because I know that it doesn't align with reality. I know that it is inconsistent. It doesn't align with the rules of logic, that sort of stuff. But I also have gotten to a point where I realize how absolutely subjective reality is to each individual person. And although reality might be objective, I don't know that I could ever really know that. And I could never know what the objective reality is because I only have my own perspective. I only have my own subjective understanding of the reality I'm in. So I think I always get caught up on, there could be something I'm missing. But as far as what I know about reality, what I know about the rules of logic and consistency, no, I don't. I
Well,
believe that the Christian God does not exist.
I'm not trying to like shoehorn you. I think I'm interested in approaches. Like I may or may not lead with, I don't, I think the Christian God is totally human made and total
Yeah,
bullshit. But it depends on what my goal is, who my audience is, who I'm
right.
engaging, right? Because if I say that to somebody that I'm trying to reach, that is a pretty much surefire way to kick them back on their heels. They shut down, fight, flight, or freeze. Nothing gets accomplished. Everybody leaves frustrated. So, I mean, I tend to
Mhm.
lead with a more not charitable, but I go less hard at the Christian God in certain context. And I think you and I have this in common. Many of the allies that we have for our secular democracy and to promote and preserve human rights, many of our allies are religious. And
Mhm.
some people that makes their brain explode. Why in the world would you ally with a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu or whatever? How would you respond to that, Christy?
Hmm. Oh man, I've gotten a lot of pushback from people ever since I started talking about um, an alliance with those that might not think like we do. It's tough when you come from the background, you have the religious trauma, you don't want to associate with that at all. If you think it's wrong and it's causing harm, then in the most simple way you can think about it, it's like, oh, well, that's bad. What those people are believing causes harm. Therefore, I don't want anything to do with it. But there's so much more nuance and complexity. And I, I know that people can be incredibly complex, and just because they have been made to believe a certain thing about the reality, it doesn't make them bad. And I really do think that people generally are good inside, and that it is their experiences, what they're taught, propaganda, all kinds of different things that can shift their perspective and perhaps cause them to hold harmful beliefs and even act in harmful ways because of those beliefs. But I've realized that I can't just put all Christians or all religious people into a box. That I wouldn't be, uh, I, it wouldn't be honest for me to assume that every Christian is what I came from, is a judgmental Southern Baptist, and all Christians have their own unique beliefs, and many of them really do just want to do the right thing and just have a belief in a deity that they think has created the world and given them rules to abide by. And as long as they have good intentions and they want to do good in this world, then I am happy to team up with them in the resistance and do whatever we can to preserve our freedoms and our democracy. And I really think it's important that atheists and Christians stop putting this wall between one another and making all these assumptions about each other, because I know Christians make a lot of assumptions about me that aren't true. And in return, atheists tend to make a lot of assumptions about Christians that aren't true. And I don't like to make assumptions because I usually end up being wrong. So I would rather be open and let people show me and tell me what they believe and what they think. And if it's not harmful, it's not causing harm, then I would, I have no issue with what they believe. I'm not going to try to convince someone to believe something else. What you believe is very personal, and it's affected by so many different things. And the brain is a weird thing, and it holds on to beliefs for all kinds of different reasons. So
I think for me, it comes down to, do we have a clash of beliefs or do we have a clash of values? Like, I have a lot of allies for state church separation who are humanists. They don't want to judge anybody. Their Jesus would never condemn anybody. Their God would never create hell, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they've rewritten their own version of Christianity, but I mean, from their heart, they really want the good. And I'll take that person any day of the week over some really nasty atheists out there. I mean, because I want someone who loves people and wants to make the world a better place. But I think we can also eventually have the conversation about what is true, what's verified, what's mythology, what's fact, what's supported, what's not. What's that line by Ingersoll? The more false we destroy, the more room we make for the true. And I think if it's not true, that's important. But if I'm hanging out with somebody who is marching alongside me against Project 2025, condemning the stealing of the country to create freaking Gilead, and they happen to go to a Christian church, I don't give a shit, right? Because they're still on my side.
yeah.
And that's hard for a lot of people to process, because I think they think, well, if they're a Christian, then they've given cover to the Christian nationalists who are behind Project 2025, who want to dominate the world and create Gilead. They're guilty by association. I don't know. It's messy. I've thrown a lot out here, Christy. Did any of that you want to speak to at all? Or
I definitely get what you're saying. If I'm marching along someone and they are, I hope that they are a Christian, and I hope they go to a Christian church, because I think we need a lot more people in the Christian churches speaking out, standing up, and actually doing something, taking action, instead of just praying or going along with what's happening. So I would hope that the people I'm marching beside are Christians and will go into their Christian churches and will talk to their communities, because yes, we have a very big issue with Christian nationalism, and the churches kind of as like one, as a whole, are very, very harmful in our society. But I think that at the same time, the church also has a history of speaking out against certain types of oppression. The church has a history of standing up for the separation of church and state. Baptists specifically have a history of that. And so I think that there has to be a way to kind of get into these communities and to speak to that. And what you said about, beliefs and values is really important, because I think you're right that at the end of the day, we might have totally wildly different beliefs. But I truly believe that even if I were to walk into a church that is very Christian nationalist and sit down with individuals and have a face-to-face conversation about what we value as human beings outside of our beliefs, I think that we would look almost identical in what we value: our freedom, democracy, well-being, happiness, human life, things like that. Even I like to bring it up as an example, like abortion. I think that even if I were to sit down with someone who is very, very anti-abortion, I am very pro-choice, and have a conversation about what we value, like boiling it all down, I think we'd both realize that we both value human life. They might just value the human life of a fetus more than they value a living woman who is, pregnant. I value the life of a living woman, but when you boil it all down, we both value human life. And I think it's really important that Christians and atheists, everybody in between, kind of have these conversations about what we value, not what we believe, because we'll actually end up probably getting on the same page. And I think we would see more Christians and more churches joining the resistance.
Well, I don't think atheists are going to win this fight by battening down the hatches and sealing up the walls and welding our culture shut, right? I mean, I want to team up with Amanda Tyler of the Baptist Joint Committee, who is a devout Christian, and she is the founder of Christians Against Christian Nationalism, and she's
It's
a
a great
freaking hero.
organization. Yep.
Rachel Lazarup at Americans United for separation of church and state. She is a practicing Jew, So am I going to get hung up on the label, or am I going to see the person and go, wow, she's a hero? She's somebody I want to ally with in this world to rehumanize these conversations. I appreciate that tone in your work. You bring real equity with the insider's perspective. It's not like you're like, well, we need to be more charitable to believers because you were one and you were a good person when you were one. And I think once we start to see each other in that way, it kind of opens up a world of possibilities. Before we wrap it up, tell me about your inbox. You must hear from a lot of people who are just scared shitless. Like, I don't know what I believe, and I don't know what to do. And I've never emailed anybody or whatever before in my life, but here's where I'm at. I know you got to get some of that, Christy.
I do. I get a lot of my inbox is usually very full. I don't know. I get a lot more emails than I would expect to with the amount of views that I get, but I do get a lot of emails from all kinds of people. Hold on one second. My cat is like meowing. Hey, can you please stop? Thank you.
It's okay. My cat's very vocal as well. It's like they're
screaming.
very hoggy of the spotlights.
Yes. And he wants in here. He doesn't like closed doors. So
you're fine. You're fine.
But anyway, I get a lot of people who are very angry with what I'm doing. I get a lot of people who also use it as an opportunity to witness. It's probably what I would have done if back when I was a teenager, I would have reached out to people and been like, I can save you. Jesus loves you. But I also get a lot of people who are just saying, sorry, my cat will not here. Come here. Come here. I'm going to just hold on to him here. I'll hold him. I think that's what he wants.
What's your cat's name?
This is Goose.
Oh, sweet little Goose.
I think he just wants to be held.
Precious. Okay, keep going. You're fine.
So I get a lot of people in my inbox that say, I've been struggling for a long time. I've been questioning, but I don't really know what to do. I'm scared. I have family that would be so mad at me. And I think the main theme is just fear. People are so afraid because they know deep in their heart that what they're being taught is not accurate and it doesn't align with the reality that they are experiencing. But they have been taught that if they deny that the reality they've been taught to believe in, that they'll go to hell or they'll lose everything. They'll lose their community. They'll lose, the support and love of their family. And that is very scary for a lot of people. So I think the main thing is just people are afraid. They're afraid to step out. They're afraid to even feel differently than what they're taught to feel. And I just find that to be so, it's just so unfortunate, that people feel as though they can't actually follow their own authentic path because their path has already been carved out by someone else.
Yeah, you don't have permission. That's sort of the coda of the Bible. This is who you are. This is how you worship. This is a list of commands you should follow. And if you don't, you're either disobedient or in rebellion, or you want to be God. You're just being haughty and prideful and egotistical. I mean, it's interesting to watch fundy religions and all of these mechanisms they have for controlling people and to be free. And it's lovely to see someone who's busted out and who is free and helping other people to do the same. I'm a fan. I appreciate you and your story and your work. I'm a fan of yours
too. I think I've been following you since probably since the beginning. Yeah.
I think I was made aware of your work like years ago, and I don't know if I reached out or I was going to send a message and invite you and it just never happened. So this has been a long.
I have to tell you this funny story. When you first reached out to me, it was like a year and a half ago or so, you sent me an email and I was on a hike at the time and I was listening to an audiobook that you narrated, the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. So I was listening to you and then you email me asking, if you want to team up. And I'm like, this is just crazy.
There is no escape from me.
Right?
I am omnipresent, Christy. Yeah. I am all. I am everywhere. What's it like to be able to hold a cat? Like my cat, he's very Persian. So he wants to be near me. He'll sit on my lap, but he refused. Like if I was to try to pick him up the way you just picked Goose up, we would have to call paramedics, right?
Really?
He would go crazy. But it
Oh
sounds
no,
like
my
Goose is
cats
all
love to
over
be
it.
picked up. Oh, they love it.
Really?
I have four, and I have one cat that does not like to be picked up at all. But Goose used to hate it. Goose actually used to hate me. He just did not like me. He liked my husband, but I would like come and sit beside him, and he would like make a noise and run off. But now he is obsessed. He's a Velcro cat, and I think yeah, three of them that love to be held. I have one that I think. He's another orange cat, and if he could be held 24/7, I think he would. I think he could survive off of love and cuddles and would never have to eat again.
There is no resisting your charms. You will break the cat's
Yes,
barriers down and
always,
you will receive all of the love. If there's
always.
anything that I or this audience can ever do to support you and your work, you have your people, call my people, because I'm a fan. You're a bridge builder. I think you are sort of pulling back the curtain as to what's happened behind many of these high control cultures. I think your voice is a liberation voice for women and for all of us. And I just wish you and yours the very best. I will link to your channel in the description box of this conversation. And let's not wait years and years to talk again. So we'll grab the cats and we'll rendezvous and do another interview here. Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. This is great.